Back here another Monday, another episode of Ask Mike. And Mike, same story, different week. The Arkansas Razorbacks finding a way to let victory slip through their hands yet again. Another close loss. Bobby Petrino now lost all 5 games, basically all 5 games by 1 possession. The Auburn game, the one outlier, but they kicked the field goal with like 30 seconds to go to make it a 9-point game. Pretty much all these games following the same script. Arkansas finding a way to let it get away at the end.
Yeah, it doesn't change, and that's why I keep saying every week, if you ask me if they're going to win, I would say no, because until they prove they can win a game, I'm not going to believe it. And I'm not sure they believe it. You may not say it, but is it in your head that you think, oh, something's going to go wrong here? I mean, they added a new twist to it. They missed a field goal. They haven't done that late. I mean, that would have put them ahead. Now, it wouldn't have guaranteed them a victory, but they would have been ahead with about 5 minutes to go. If the defense steps up, then maybe you win the game. Just every week there's something new.
So they're probably looking at a 2-10, maybe a 3-9 season. But have you ever seen a year like this? Because they've had some bad years in the past. Those Chad Morris years. They were getting blown out week by week under Chad Morris. They're competitive in every single game, and they're still probably only going to win 2 or 3 games.
Yeah, that's because they do have. I'm not saying it's a great team, but they've got the talent to go to a bowl game this year. If you just look at who they had on paper and what they had coming in, I thought they were a bowl team. And I still think they could have been. But there's things wrong with this team. Psychological things, I think. You'd have to get somebody to go in there and talk to them and figure it out. But if you brought in a psychologist and had him interview either – and I was talking to somebody earlier today about a player that on another team that had a problem. And the guy said, look, they have a sports psychologist, and this player was able to work this thing out, and his play got a lot better. And I don't think Arkansas has anybody like that. If they do, they haven't publicized it, because you sure need that for sure.
Yeah, the Razorbacks now lost 4 games where they've had a double-digit lead. Memphis, Auburn, Mississippi State, and now the most recent one, LSU. So time to give the people what they want. It is time for Ask Mike. First question here. Coming from Break the Cycle, who asks, is hiring a new coach going to change anything? It's almost like everything connected to this football program needs to be gone, but what will that do?
First of all, I don't agree with everything needs to be gone, because a lot of people say that. Get rid of all the players, start completely fresh like Cal did with basketball a year ago. Football is more complicated than that. You've got more players, and you got to keep some. And I promise you, whoever they hire will come in, and if there's a grad assistant or 2 that stick around, they'll talk to them and say, okay, who do we really want to retain off this? Because there's some good young players on this team. K.J. Jackson, the quarterback, who'll be a redshirt sophomore next year, maybe a redshirt junior.
I believe redshirt sophomore, that's right.
Yeah.
Would be his 3rd year in the program.
Yeah. He's somebody you want to stay. And there's some other guys like that. I mean, Braylon Russell, I would want to keep him. I mean, I think it hurt him not being available in this game, and they found out that he got a concussion in practice right before. I mean, these are bad luck things that happen. You think he couldn't have scored on that goal line stand where you had to get 1/2 of a yard? I think he would have scored there. They didn't have him. He'll be back this week. But there's some players on this team that you want to keep. There's 2 schools of thought on who they should bring in here, and this is where the Franklin stuff got started. Because when they were looking at Franklin, you've got a guy that could bring in a staff that was proven. Now, they may not have had a good year this year, but it was a staff that was proven. And then you've got players that the word was he could bring a lot of players with him. So that made him attractive.
More so at the prep level, but yes.
Yeah, that made him attractive. Now, there were some issues that popped up apparently. I can't get into a lot of it because it's just stuff I don't want to deal with, but there were some things about Northwest Arkansas that he looked at and went, this is not a place for my family. And it's not bad. It's not Northwest Arkansas. It's a bunch of gangsters or whatever.
Hey, it's his life. He could do whatever he wanted.
There was some infrastructure things here that caused him to look somewhere else. So there's that. Okay, then what do they do? What do they call those other conferences, the other 5, whatever they are?
There's the group of 5, soon to be the group of 6 whenever they add the Pac-12.
Yeah, the group of 5. There's some coaches out there that what they've done is they've won at a lower level, but they also have good young players they could bring in and a staff they could bring in, and you have fewer problems. As if when you talk about these Gruden rumors, what makes those so silly is he'd have to come up with a staff. Where's he going to come up with a staff? How's he going to recruit? He hasn't recruited ever, I think, on the college level. So it sounds like it will be one of those coaches. But, you know, you keep hearing all these crazy stuff, and it's not just crazy stuff you read on the internet. I'm being told stuff that makes no sense to me. And that's why I've started to disregard all of it. I think they're doing such a good job behind the scenes of sending people in different directions that even somebody like me can't come to any conclusions.
Yeah, and that's why Hunter Yurchek said that the day after he fired Sam Pittman. This is why you hire a search firm. It's not for them to do the work for us. Right. It's more for confidentiality, trying to keep things quiet. You mentioned there are some building blocks on this team, and I do agree with you there. But the programs we've seen that have had some pretty immediate success in a turnaround, it's been more based on the transfer portal and who they're bringing in immediately. So which do you prefer to see here? Do you prefer them to build around more so they're young players, maybe the prep route, or do you want to see a wholesale change, whole new coaching staff, whole new roster?
Well, not a whole new roster, but bring in a lot of guys out of the portal if you can do it, because that's a quicker turnaround. I think the fans are so upset about this season. It's going to be hard to sell them on this idea that somebody comes in next year and wins 3 games and then 5 the next year and then maybe the 3rd year. I don't know.
You don't get that kind of time anymore.
I don't think you do. I don't think they're patient. They've gone through this with Pittman with, oh yeah, next year's going to be better. Next year's going to be better. And I kind of stuck with him on that, and I realize now I was wrong. Yeah. You got to do something to get this turned around quicker.
I think it used to be you got 4 years. Then about 15 years, 20 years ago, it became, okay, you got 3 years. Now, would you agree with this? You get 2 years.
2. And one, if you're coming off as bad a season as this one is, you better do something in the first year that at least is different, that makes you feel different. Get some guys that are really giving effort, some guys that don't make mistakes. They do the right thing at the right time. They're the ones coming up with the interceptions and the fumble recoveries.
It would be interesting if they hire Bobby Petrino, if somehow they get to that pathway, because the day after Pittman was relieved, Hunter Yurchek said the close losses had a lot to do with it. Yes, I gave him credit for it, but 4-19 in one-score games, that just wasn't good enough. Well, I feel like if they hire Bobby Petrino, it's going to be, well, hey, Bobby's close. He just needs more time. So it's going to be 6 in one, half a dozen in the other if somehow they get there.
Yeah, you got fans that want that. One of them is coming up in a question here in a minute, but I don't see that. I just don't think it's happening.
All right, let's have at it here. Next question. Razor Alex 88 says, I've been pretty numb to this whole game. Couldn't even get angry about the turnovers. Mid-State game had drained all the fury out of me. I'm just numb to it all. It looks like James Franklin may be going to Virginia Tech. Probably a better fit for him.
Well, I would dispute the Virginia Tech thing, because that's been a rumor for 3.5 weeks, and he'd still not committed there. I think he's looking somewhere else besides that. He may end.
You know what? He'd be foolish not to. Because if LSU and Florida strike out on Lane Kiffin, hey, James Franklin doesn't look so bad now. What are we going to pay him?
Sure. So even though I don't think he's coming here, and I'm not ruling it completely out because so many crazy things have been said behind the scenes, but it doesn't look like he's coming here, then I don't think I think if I was a Virginia Tech fan counting on him, I would have given up a while ago, because they supposedly had a deadline of last night, and then they were moving on. Well, nothing's been announced, so I don't know what's going on there. Here's the thing. Yeah, they are numb. The fans are numb. And is there a value to numbness? I don't know. I think it's a danger, because you can stop caring. As long as you're mad, this is what Frank Broyles always used to tell me. When we lose, as long as our fans are mad, I can buy into that, because they care.
It's like fighting with your wife. Yeah. Fighting shows you care. It's when you're not fighting. That's when the real problems start happening.
It's when you don't get that anger anymore. They were just resigned and they don't care anymore, and you don't want that. And this is where we're at right now. I'm not saying it's every fan, but more and more of these fans are just numb to this whole thing, and it's a real danger, I think. They got to get this hire right.
Hey, Arkansas fans, do the math. If 20, 30,000 people aren't showing up to the game, and all those people would average, $20,000, or excuse me, $20, you're talking like a loss of $600,000, $700,000 a game. That adds up. You need people in the building.
Yeah, so if you
need that supporting the local economy, the university economy.
Yeah, so if you need money for NIL and all that stuff, rev sharing, that's not going to do it. So again, think of the pressure that's under the people. If it's Yurchek by himself or his committee or whoever, think of the pressure they're under. They got to get this right.
Yeah, It feels that way. It feels like the time is now where they have to get it right. But hey, to make the analogy, I've seen it in the NFL so many times. So, well, we got to get the quarterback right. We got to get the quarterback. And then you're the Buffalo Bills, and you go 20 years between Jim Kelly and Josh Allen, or the Miami Dolphins and Dan Marino to Tua Tagovailoa. They tried so many different things, just didn't work out. Hopefully that's not the case for Arkansas. They're going to get it right. They're going to do it this time. Fat Hog, next question here saying, watching the Razorbacks' failure to execute in the fourth quarter is a replay of many games this year. It seems to be a coaching and player issue. No direction and lack of motivation. Well, look, if it's not a coaching or player issue, what could it possibly be? So, yeah, I would agree with that. It's coaching and it's the players.
I think there are two things going on here, and I want to talk about both of them. But one of them is the failure to develop key leaders going back to the off-season winter conditioning program. That's when it starts every year. It starts in mid to late January. That is the worst time of the year for a player. I've talked to so many of them because you're cooped up inside. You're running all over that indoor workout area, just running drills and running yourself to exhaustion. You're lifting weights all the time. You're fatigued. There are no fans there. There's nobody to pump you up. There's people yelling at you all the time. And you got to suck it up, and that's when it starts. So how do you make that work? John McDonald years ago told me that one of the keys to his success was that every year he identified a group of guys that he felt like could be leaders within the team. And he said that I made coaches out of them. They were like coaches. They went where I wasn't. They were around when I wasn't. And I trusted them, and I told them, I would call them into my office and tell them, if there's somebody in that locker room that we don't want, you come tell me and I'll get rid of them. That's how much faith I have in you. And when you do that, it works. And he won a lot of national championships. Everybody thinks they were favored every time they weren't. They came out of nowhere. Athletes would come out of a guy that was not even counted on in the long jump would suddenly jump, a foot and a half further than he ever had. They just did things like that. A pole vaulter comes out of nowhere. A miler runs 3 seconds better than he's ever run before. And that was motivated by every guy on that team buying into what those leaders told them. So this team, as nearly as I can tell, I don't see that. I don't see leadership within the team. I see guys out there playing, but you don't see on the sidelines when you're watching at games, if you're at games, I don't see that going on. So that is a serious issue. Here's another problem, I think. And I'm going to use Talon Green as an example. Something wrong there. I don't know what it is. When they brought him in here, I read stories, 2 or 3 internet stories about what was going on at Boise State and why he left there. And they talked about how that he had been benched for turnovers. They benched him to motivate him. And then they brought him back and he was a little better. But the idea was Bobby Petrino was going to take him and rework him and make him into the quarterback that he could be, because all of us will agree there are moments when he's unbelievable. He looks like the best quarterback you've ever seen.
Really high ceiling.
Yeah.
But the floor with some of those turnovers is very low.
But then he throws into triple coverage for no reason, and you're going, what caused that? So there's an issue there. I don't know what it is. I have no idea. But it was Bobby Petrino's job to find out what it is, and he hasn't figured it out, and it's still going on. And that he's not the only one like that. There are players on this team that have made mistakes because they haven't identified something going on with them. I was talking to somebody about an hour ago, and they were telling me about a player on a team that they cover. They said this guy was having all kinds of issues. He wasn't performing. They have a sports psychologist attached to the football program. And he went in and started talking to this guy, and whatever issue he had, he got it worked out and came back and was playing well. Maybe that's an issue that they need to look into. Get somebody on that team that if a player has an emotional, going through a problem with his family, his parents, maybe he's married, maybe he's got a girlfriend. I asked John McDonald one time, I said, what is the biggest problem you face as a coach? And he said, girlfriends. He said, you have no idea what girlfriends can do to an athlete if they get mad at them. So the point is, these are still young people that are emotional, and they're dealing with issues, and somebody needs to be there to figure out what's going on. And then there's this whole idea of how do you coach guys in the NIL era? You look at this team.
Yeah, it's hard to find leaders when you're turning. Talon Green's only been here for 2 years. Xavier and Sori, those are prominent voices. They're good leaders, but it's different. And they're not from here. They don't know the fabric, that kind of thing.
How many guys are on this team in key roles right now that know they're not going to be here next year? They know. They know they're not going to be here.
Sure. And
they're out there trying to win games for you? How do you coach that? There's just so many issues now in coaching that are different than what it used to be.
I'll tell you how you should coach it and how you do get production out of that. They're paid professionals now. That's what they are. You're being paid. You go out there, you earn your paycheck. That's hopefully why Arkansas are going to continue to fight to the finish here. Just getting started with Mike Irwin. A lot more to come on Ask Mike after a quick timeout. Back here on Ask Mike and dissecting another close loss for the Arkansas Razorbacks as they find a way to let victory slip through their hands in the fourth quarter. Yet again, Razorbacks now 2-8 on the year. Next question here coming from Just Win, who asks, what do you make of all these Bobby fans? They offer excuse after excuse for him. At some point saying it's not his fault stops having any meaning. Crazy to me, Mike. You know, we had Hunter Yurachek talk about the close losses were part of the reason why he got rid of Sam Pittman. You know, it built up over time. There was some good equity. It's good to be close. But at the end of the day, you're still losing the game. Well, I do agree with this. There's Bobby defenders say, oh, you know, Bobby's close. But what's really changed? Pittman was close.
Here's what I think's going on. I think that a lot of people believe he is that guy that he was in 09, 010, and
He's
11.
not the guy that got fired at Louisville. He's not the guy with the losing record since he lost Lamar Jackson.
He's that other guy that we had because he was the last really good winning coach Arkansas has. So they just look at him and they remember before. Here's the problem. I'd love if that were to be true, but here's the problem with those people. They totally ignore, they blame everything on the defense, and they totally ignore the fact that the defense has improved slightly. It's not a lot better, but it is a little bit better. The offense is every bit as inconsistent as it ever was.
Probably more inconsistent since he became the head coach.
Yeah, it's just they keep having these issues. And look, the play calling on that goal line stand was not good. He's calling the plays. I was going, you're going to try that 3 times in a row? Yeah. Do something different, throw a pass, do something. Because if you don't, you're going to be sitting there and you've turned the ball over when you should have scored. So it is his fault. All of these coaches on the offensive side, almost all of them are his guys. There's 1 or 2 that he inherited, the offensive line coach, you know. But, I mean, he's got his own wide receivers coach in there, their own running backs coach. He's got his people in place, and he's brought a lot of his own players in. I mean, Sam Pittman bent over backwards, loading this offense down with players out of the portal to the expense of the defense. And it's still not working. Yeah. So I don't know how you ignore that. I couldn't ignore it. And I like him. I like the guy. I liked him when he was here the first time. So I don't have issues with him at all, but I can't, this isn't about whether I like somebody or not. I got to be honest, and I just don't think he's done anything to get this job.
Can some of the intensity be a detriment? Because I think with his personality, fans really get behind it. But there's 2 things I'm thinking here. The personal foul call against Mississippi State, you don't see head coaches get that. That rarely happens. You know, that happens at a school, you know, I don't know, maybe once every 3 or 4 years. It happened to Bobby. That had a huge impact on the game. Sure. Bulldogs weren't moving the ball. Then this week, at half, like extremely intense. You could see, I mean, if he could only get his hands on that official, you know, that dude would be in a world of trouble. But at the same time, it's like, well, are you maybe a little bit of a distraction? Is there too much emphasis going on some of the officiating for Bobby?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a mistake. We don't even know if what he was saying. I looked at that play. I couldn't tell.
It wasn't obvious. Maybe it was ticky-tack.
If there was a little bit, it looked like to me kind of a bad pass, and the receiver didn't really move very well toward the ball. Yeah. Maybe he got held a little bit. But it wasn't just a blatant thing where you can look at it and say, yeah, Bobby, go after this guy. So I thought that was a mistake.
I think fans love the passion. They love the intensity. You know, it's like in basketball. The home coach gets teed up. Yeah. The place goes crazy. So there's a lot of support for that. But yeah, you do have to wonder. Bobby Petrino said it himself. I moved upstairs as an offensive coordinator because I needed to spend less time with the officials. I needed to focus my energy somewhere else, and it's kind of reared its head just a little bit. Next question here coming from Hog Redneck, who says, Petrino is doing his best to hold his team together, but it's an impossible job. I'm amazed that he's kept his cool, except for the refs, and I'd go off on them too. I have a lot of respect for him.
Here's the problem. Again, I think a lot of people think that he can be that old Bobby Petrino, and that's why they like that. That's why they like it when he yells at referees, when he goes off and all this stuff, because that's the old Bobby Petrino, and they think that's the key. You can't coach that way anymore. You just can't. I could sit here and talk for an hour about things I saw him do or heard about things. I mean, I used to do a radio show with one of the running backs that played under him. He told me all kinds of stories about what the guy did to them in practice. I mean, he was brutal on these guys. In the NIL area when players can just transfer, you can't treat them that way anymore. And he's not. He's not like that anymore because he can't be. So thinking you want to get this old Bobby Petrino back, you can't get that guy back because he couldn't coach that way today and be successful.
Yeah, I did think he showed a lot of personality on Monday. He is different. His presentation is a little bit different, and he's been easy to work with. And I do think he's gotten more effort. It's crazy to me they've lost all these games and they've gotten the buy-in. But you made the point that what's changed? The results really aren't any different. Next question here coming from Marty Bird's Proxy, who asked, is it now okay for players to throw the bird to the opposing team's fans? I know things are different nowadays, but dang, does this help us be a better football team? This happened after the second touchdown. It's very plain and simple on video. I don't know if it was. I thought it could have been something else, but I really haven't seen it. So
I've been told that it also happened at the Tennessee game, that they caught that on video too. I don't know. It wasn't addressed today. Nobody asked about it. Here's my take on that. There are so many problems with this team right now that that's not a priority. What are you going to do, suspend some other guys, for that? I would hope that when you get a new coaching staff in here, that you wouldn't see any of that. One of the things that fans have told me they don't like is when somebody does something successful with this team, they act like they've been doing that all year, and the attitude seems to be, okay, you caught a pass, okay, you ran 40 yards, just get up and go back to the huddle. Until we win, then you can get really excited. But don't get me all excited because that doesn't mean anything because I know what's fixing to happen later.
Yeah, I remember hearing a story one time from a coach that says the idea of act like you've been there before.
Right.
Well, what if we haven't been there before? It's okay to get invested in a moment.
Maybe, but again, I think the reaction of most of our fans that I've talked to is, I don't want to see you get excited after you catch a big pass or break off a 30-yard run because that doesn't mean anything to me until you win, until it makes me think you're going to win the game. Because if you're fired up, yeah, you can like that. You can like seeing a player all fired up. But how do you get unfired up on the next series of downs? Because we've seen that over and over again. I just ran 40 yards. Now I don't run very hard, and I get knocked backwards for 30 yards.
Intramurals back in the Texas State days or high school football. Were you a fullback? Is that right?
Me? No, never. I was a nose guard.
Because you didn't even play offense?
A little bit.
So what's you're getting in the end zone. What, you spiking it? You dunking it over the goalpost? What's Mike Irwin doing to celebrate a big play?
It wouldn't be me, but I was out there with people that did that, and no, they didn't do anything. You scored, you hand the ball to the ref, you went. Our coaches told us, take the ball to them after you score, and then you didn't do anything. Your teammates would come gather around you and kind of pop you on the shoulder pads and everything, and but nobody was going bananas.
You're an old school guy. That's an old school take, and he's not wrong. That's the way it should be. Me, I'm first team all fun. Have some fun, kids. Don't be giving anybody the middle finger. Don't be saying anything you shouldn't say. Don't be doing any of that stuff. But have fun.
Yeah.
Let's bring some fun into the game. Next question here coming from Hog in Iowa, who wants to know, would our record be any worse if not one dime in NIL had been passed out? And if so, would it really make a difference? Okay. Yes. It'd be a lot worse. You'd be winless.
Here's what I think he's asking. When you're talking about this team, could you put together a bunch of guys that got no NIL money and be pretty much where this team is? No, they'd probably be 0-10 or 0-12 when the season's over. So it's maybe 2 games better. But the point is, has the NIL money made this team better? And you can't argue that it has. They get the money, but they aren't winning, so the money has nothing to do with it. It's still coaching. And everybody thinks that NIL should mean that you're going to play better. I don't think you play better because you get more money. I don't. I think you still, regardless of what you're getting paid, you're still going to respond to coaching, leadership by your teammates, or if you decide to be a leader or whatever. I mean, look at Arch Manning. I mean, the guy's sitting there struggling all year long. He's good, then he's bad, then now there's rumors he's going to transfer to Tennessee because he doesn't like the way he's being treated by their fans there. Come on, you're getting $1 gajillion, but you're not worth it.
Well, look at the NFL. You know, the highest salary teams are not always the best teams. In fact, sometimes the highest salary team doesn't even make the playoffs. Can you make a case that now more than ever, the head coach actually means more? Like, yeah, you got to have the funding, but it takes if you have the funding but the wrong head coach to control those personalities, you're just burning money.
Exactly, it does. Coaching does still matter. Leadership within the team matters, and good coaches find those leaders and have them around their teammates all year long at critical times. The 2021 team, Sam Pittman's best team, had about 5 or 6 key leaders, and we interviewed them every week, and there were stories about what they did at critical points in games that got them over the top. That's just something that should be there. It's not even, to me, debatable. When the best coaches in the game tell you that's what you need to do, that's what you need to do.
Joey McGuire, our guy, we brought him up here a lot, Texas Tech. It's not just as simple as we got an influx of cash. He's the right guy for the job right now, and Texas Tech looks like they're going to the playoff, might even host a home playoff game if all goes well. Next question here, Eddie Lynn, who says, it's Texas week. If anything could get us all out of this awful funk, it would be a win over the Texas Tea-Sippers. Make it happen, guys. Make it happen. Texas bites.
Okay, I know him. I've known him most of my life. He's a huge Texas Tech fan, and Texas Tech fans hate Texas. And
everybody hates Texas.
Yeah.
They're kind of in that like Notre Dame.
They hate them
category.
about like Razorback fans hate them. It's that bad. And so if you beat them, a lot of years when Tech wasn't having good years, if you could beat them, it just made you happy all during the offseason. When you didn't think about, we only won 5 games this year, beat Texas, that makes it worth it. So this would make the offseason a little better. It's still not going to undo the position that Arkansas is in. It's still not going to change the fact that you're dead last in the SEC, and you got to get out of that hole somewhere. And they've got to hire a coach, the right coach, and they got to make all this stuff happen and get people to come back next year when there's no reason for a lot of them to come back. But yes, it would make people feel better at least next week.
All right, how do you feel? So the Texas thing, good on the SEC. They're making the Arkansas-Texas thing happen annually. I think that's good for both sides. Maybe Texas didn't necessarily want it, but certainly Arkansas wanted it. They got it. How do you feel about the rivals they got? LSU, Texas, Missouri. Those are tough matchups. And I know everybody poo-poos Missouri, but look, Arkansas can't beat Missouri. Missouri's owned them since they've entered the conference. And another thing here, you're kind of both in the same boat. People forget this because it's been a while, but Arkansas is an outsider too. They were part of the expansion with South Carolina. So there was 10 teams in the league. They came in 11 and 12. And then the next wave was Missouri. So, you know, it's not like you can just play the traditional powers in the SEC because those are the school colors you want to see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with those 3. In fact, the only other logical team to put in there would be A&M, and I think that would be too tough if you replaced Missouri with A&M every year. That would be
What if you replaced LSU with A&M?
Well,
or Ole Miss, which is a team they had some, or Oklahoma because of proximity. So there was some juggling they could have done.
Texas and LSU are good rivalries, maybe more than A&M. Missouri's not a rival for a lot of Arkansas fans.
Nor is it for Missouri.
Yeah,
but again, marriage of convenience because you're both outsiders in the conference. Yeah. That's why it's there.
I think you could argue Ole Miss. A lot of rivalry there among Razorback fans about Ole Miss. So it could have been Ole Miss, could have been plugged in there. A&M could have been plugged in there, but I'm fine with it. I think they did a decent job on that.
I do wish they could have gotten one of Ole Miss or Oklahoma, you know, proximity-wise, a little bit easier to get to.
Oklahoma would have been another good choice. It's not a rivalry now, but it would have become one. And they may have missed out on that because they're close to each other.
Yeah.
And it's border states, and I mean, I realize Missouri's border state, but Columbia is way up there. I mean, it's just a hop, a skip, and a jump, Oklahoma City.
Yeah, and keep in mind, they're going to cycle through this for 4 years, and then they will reevaluate it.
And by the way, I'd like to see Oklahoma State. I wish Oklahoma State had come in instead of OU or Texas, because then you'd have a real close rivalry and a team you could probably have some back and forth with.
Yeah, Arkansas may have gotten as hard of a draw as any team in the conference. You know, Missouri has been a very strong program under Drinkwitz.
Right now. Now, Drinkwitz may be leaving, and that might change. But
He could. He's got a lot of openings in the country. There's probably going to be a lot of turnover and all these coaches. Lane Kiffin, as of now, as of Monday afternoon, still hasn't said he isn't leaving.
I think he's going now. I didn't think he was, but that stupid press conference.
He's had every chance to say I'm leaving, and he hadn't done it.
And he had every chance to say, I'm staying, and he didn't do it. So what
Well,
is that?
sorry, that's
Yeah.
what I meant. He wouldn't say he's leaving. He had every chance
He wouldn't
to
say, I'm staying, and that makes me wonder.
All right, more to come here on Ask Mike after a quick timeout. Back here with Mike Irwin. Time now for more questions on this week's Ask Mike. Next question here from Nortex Arky, who wants to know, is the "we've got our guy" rumor not just a smokescreen, but a way to distract fans' focus away from the coaching search and the fatigue that has set in so that we can pay more attention to the various games that are going to be played here in all sports between now and the actual announcement date? Or is it the next step in the media cycle to continue to create interest in Arkansas and the opening? Mike,
Yeah, that's way too complicated of a scenario.
There's a lot of verbiage in there.
Yeah,
I
think I don't know because they're not going to tell me. But there is a lot of smoke, and I think what they're doing is they're very cleverly doing this to keep people off track. Because if you're somebody like me and you hear 3 different things from 3 different people, you go, what do I believe? And so you don't come to any firm conclusions. And that's pretty much what's happened, which is good for them. I mean, I think what the only thing I can figure out is that they're talking with some people that they feel like if it gets out there, it could affect the person's decision. So you kind of, it may be mentioned, but as long as everybody's not saying it, so it's kind of common knowledge, then you've got the plausible deniability. You've got the idea that whoever this candidate is doesn't really, he doesn't think people are on to him. Yeah. That's the only thing I can think of. I'm not on that committee. I don't know what their thinking is, but that's the only thing that makes sense to me, is that they just don't want the information to get out there and mess up the job search. It would spook somebody and go, I don't know, my players. I mean, I do think that happened with Mullen. I do. And it's partially my fault because I was told about Mullen's interest, and I was told by somebody that knows him pretty well, and I was not told that I shouldn't use it. Mm-hmm. So I did. And then it got out, and all of a sudden he's getting all kinds of pressure where he is, and he's trying to win games there, and I think it made him mad. And so there's probably a good reason why you don't let that out there.
Hey, don't rule out Dan Mullen yet. You know, that's
it's possible.
And not even necessarily here. If he's saying I'm not leaving, don't think he wouldn't take a big bag of money.
Yeah.
All right, next question here coming from HBT Hog, who asks, if your source is right, doesn't Cliff Kingsbury make sense too? How about them Hogs?
Well, I'm not sure what source he's talking about because I've had so many that I've talked about. I do recall 2.5 weeks ago when I was talking to somebody about Franklin. Here's the story I was told, and I'm not saying this is true. I just want you to understand what I'm being told. I'm talking to somebody about Franklin, and the story I got was, well, when they found out how much money Virginia Tech was offering him, one of the people that was involved said, well, if we're going to spend that kind of money, let's go after somebody else. And that person was a Kingsbury fan. Mm-hmm. Now, I haven't heard anything about that lately. I think it was never really going to happen. But this guy, if you look at Kingsbury, he has no real track record of success as a college head coach.
And he had Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. His success has been more as a coordinator. And again, he'd have this issue of who's going to be on his staff, who's he going to bring in. That hire makes no sense. So even though I'm not sure about too many things, I'm gonna say the Kingsbury rumor is bogus.
He is very good with the quarterbacks. I want to say he had Case Keenum at Houston. That could be wrong. I know he had Johnny Manziel. Certainly he had Patrick Mahomes. So he's had some really good quarterbacks that he's gotten a lot out of, even the NFL, doing some really good things at times. He's gotten the most out of Kyler Murray and now with Jaden Daniels, if the guy can stay healthy. Next question here coming from S. Giles, who says, I know you're an air raid guy and you like Eric Morris. It looks like he's taking North Texas to the college football playoff. Any chance Arkansas hires him?
Yeah, his path to the playoffs is maybe a little more difficult than that. I mean, he's on track maybe to end up tied for first place in that conference. South Florida beat them, but then South Florida has 2 losses. He only has 1. But then they have a championship game, and then even that doesn't get that conference champion into the playoffs. They
have to be the highest.
They have to be the highest of them. So I don't know that he's going that far. What I like about him is, and you mentioned Mahomes and all this stuff. Well, the guy that was really the developer of Mahomes, even though Kingsbury was the head coach, was Morris, and he has a long history. I've told this story before. He was a little point guard on the basketball team at Shallowater, which is a town south of Lubbock. And my hometown had really good basketball teams in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And one of my buddies, I'd always call him up and ask him how the basketball team was doing. And one night he said, well, we went down and we played Shallowater, and he said, they got this little point guard I'd never heard of, and he said, he scored 40 points on us. What is with that guy? And then he called me back a couple of years later and said, hey, he's a wide receiver for Mike Leach. And Leach calls him his little midget or something like that, some crazy term, I can't remember. And he's about 5'8", something like that, but he was one of their better receivers. And he just has a history of developing quarterbacks. He's put quarterbacks into the NFL. His quarterback this year is one of the top passing quarterbacks in the country. He's also got one of the top running backs in the country, and apparently one of the top wide receivers. So you talk about a guy that if you got him and he brought those guys in here, this is sort of what we were talking about.
Especially if a lot of those guys are sophomores and juniors.
Sure. But I mean, there's nothing to indicate to me that he's going to be here. I mean, he could be. I think if they ended up hiring him, what I heard more likely with him is that Baylor may be looking at him. If there's a change made at Baylor, he may end up there.
All right, next question here coming from Parallax Pig, who says, I keep hearing this $40 million NIL commitment for football being thrown around. To be clear, is that pure NIL, or are we really talk about revenue sharing? I think my interpretation of this, so it's going to be $20 million for revenue share. I wonder if he means, is that $40 million in addition to the 20, or is it 20 in addition to the 20 making?
And there's no way for us to know that. The 30 to 40 was being thrown out there when Franklin was in play. They were talking about trying to match Virginia Tech. That was the thing I was being told behind the scenes. Now, what that 30 to 40 consisted of, I don't know. The normal, what I understand, when this rev sharing kicks in, which will be next year, next football season, 12 to 13 million is going to be earmarked for football. So if you took 12 to 13 million away from 40, then you ended up more like 28, 29 million, something like that, which wouldn't be a huge amount of money. And why is this important? That's what I want to talk about. Because fans are tired of being told we don't have any money. And you hear different things about why Arkansas doesn't have that money that other schools seem to have for NIL. And I've been told over and over again, because the people with that money are not unified, that if you get the coach they want, then they'll give money. But if you get a coach they don't want, then they're not giving you their money. They've got to figure out some way to get these people to come together.
It's so hard to find a coach that everybody wants.
It is, and that's part of what the problem is. So again, what some people are saying is that's what your AD has to do. He has to get these people in the same room and get them to come together. And so that's why he wants to know that. Do we really have $40 million out there? Are we willing to play with the big boys, or are we just making stuff up and trying to make it look bigger than it is? And I don't know the answer to that.
And next question here coming from WV Hog fan, who wants to know, what have you heard or know about the Big Ten getting some financial corporation, private equity, to donate millions and millions of dollars to each school to pay for NIL?
Yeah, you may be more of an economist than I am.
My 401k is down. That's about all I got.
They're talking about doing, you take money, I think they're talking about investing money in the retirement fund for Cal, the University of California, and somehow that gets invested into something that generates interest, but it's more like the stock market. The better it goes, the better it is, and you make more and more money. And they project $2.3 billion over the next 20 years and $140 million for each school. And it all sounds great, and apparently from what I've read, all the schools are wanting it because it maybe solves their revenue problems.
Except for Michigan.
But what the economists are warning is, if you do this, it could blow right up in your face, because let's say this fund goes bananas and you've got it budgeted and you're counting on it, and all of a sudden it just vanishes, because that can happen. And then what do? You're without this money that you thought you were going to spend, and then what players start leaving, you're starting to lose now. So here's what I would say. If they do this, you know who's going to do it next? The SEC. It won't matter that it's maybe a bad idea. And that's what I'm talking about. This is all because there's just this need to generate more money and more money and more money. And I still believe, may not be in my lifetime, but I believe this is all going to blow up at some point, and colleges are going to have to go back to the way it was, or it's just not going to, nobody's going to want it anymore. I still believe that most people don't like the idea that you win championships by buying them. I got all kinds of friends in Lubbock. They're all excited. And here's what I say to them. I said, okay, I sat there as a kid and all the way through high school watching Tech be not any good, wishing for the day when they could be good. So you're there now. And why are you there? Because you have a billionaire that spent more money on these players than any team in the country. Nobody, even Texas, has spent the money that Texas Tech has spent. Does that make you happy if you win a championship? And they'll say yes. Yep. But the truth is, deep down inside, at some point, they're going to realize we just won. Because the players are not from the Lubbock area. They've imported all of them.
Players from the Lubbock area aren't good enough. There's not enough of them.
And then they're going to be gone. And in the old days,
Ohio State, Texas, they're running national programs too.
I'm watching Donnie Anderson at Green Bay because I watched him as a Red Raider, and I followed him all the way through his career. And my buddy still calls me up and said, hey, I saw Donnie Anderson the other day at the mall in Lubbock. And he tells me all about it. And it's just something, there's something about that as opposed to a guy that's in here for 1 year and he's gone and you don't even remember him after that.
I get what you're saying. I do. And it's not that you're wrong. But same thing with, before all this existed, the recruiting violations. What do they care if you take the banner down? We know it happened. We lived it, and I think that's what people want. All right, he's Mike Irwin. More to come on Ask Mike after a timeout. Back here on Ask Mike, wrapping things up here for the week, getting set for Arkansas to take on Texas year 2 as members of the SEC. Next question here coming from Counselor Hogg, who asks, can you please explain what the NCAA actually does related to FBS football? The players go wherever they want, whenever they want, they get paid, and it doesn't appear academic eligibility is even a consideration. Let me tell you this. These players major in eligibility. They may think they're there to get an education, but they're, especially the money being thrown around now, they're football players first.
Well, theoretically, most of what the NCAA used to control with football is now controlled by the so-called Power 4 committee.
And more specifically, the SEC and the Big Ten.
Yeah. There's 4 athletic directors that are in charge of this thing, and they're the ones that worked out the courthouse settlement, a settlement where the courts agreed, the House of Representatives agreed, and what was supposed to do is solve all these problems. You were going to turn everything into revenue sharing. There'd be a salary cap. Everybody would have the same amount of money, and it would all be fair. It hasn't worked out that way because if they had, Texas Tech wouldn't be doing what it's doing right now. So I talked to Hunter Yurchek the day that Petrino was announced. So that's been, a month ago or more. And he told me he thinks that for the 2026-27 academic year, which would start next July, about that time, he said at that point, I think it's going to be fully invested. I think it's going to start to kick in. And he thinks they will be able to catch the cheaters, the ones that are breaking the rules. And he thinks people are breaking the rules right now just to test, to see. And if they get caught, they go, oh, we didn't know. Oh, we're sorry. And they don't think anything's going to happen to them. I got no idea what's going to happen. I've got people skeptical that are telling me it's baloney. The cheating is going to continue. The Power 4 committee is not going to run football any better than the NCAA did. So maybe. Now, as far as the academic thing, here's the deal. I was told by somebody over at the U of A athletic department that, no, those academic standards are still in place. When was the last time you remember a guy being suspended? Because it used to happen all the time.
You're right.
You'd hear about a guy.
It would be ineligible for the bowl game, whatever,
He'd been ineligible because he had to get his grades back up. I never hear of that anymore, ever. I can't remember the last time I heard that.
And kids don't go to class anymore either. Imagine that.
They do it remotely. Okay, now if you're going to class remotely, which means by a computer, who's in front of that computer? Who's doing the work?
Who's taking the test?
Who's taking the test? I mean, there are a lot of questions here about the academics part of it, and that needs to be resolved. Because if these people are not there as students to get an education, are you serious? Just split the whole thing off from the university then, and just make it a minor league sports team.
And apparently, a quick thought on Texas Tech there. They front-loaded all this money because it's the last unregulated year. So they front-loaded all this money for some 2-year contracts on players, and then next year, 26-27, they're going to have all $20 million in revenue share that they are going to put towards football. So this really could be a grand analytical, data kind of driven financial plan that really works out for Texas Tech to have some success here. We've been talking a lot about student athletes and whatnot, and you kind of made the point here. I wanted to see if you can add anything to it. How far are we, or how far away are we, or will it ever happen to the point where they're not students anymore? They're just employees. And maybe even we go to the extent of there's a draft or more of like a salary pool for how much. I don't know how you can tell a kid where he has to go to college or whatnot, but then again, if they're employees and it truly is minor league football, maybe that could be the model. They don't have to go to class anymore.
Yeah, it could be. I don't
and then
know.
They'd have contracts. Right?
I don't know where it's headed. What it would do, the way you would sell it is that it's entertainment for the students. The students still get to go and watch it. So, and look, if you're one of these people that on the academic side that don't think athletics affects academics, do away with the athletic program at the U of A and see what the enrollment is going to be in 5 years. It'll start dropping like a rock.
Right.
Because those kids won't come up from Little Rock anymore. They won't come up from Texas.
They want a full college experience.
They want a full college experience. You want to go. You want to go to Bud Walton Arena. You want to go watch the football games. You want to go to the baseball games and sit out in the hog pen. Those things are important. So even if that was separate from the students, even if they weren't really students, they were just student age people, it's still entertainment that you go watch because it's sort of semi-attached to the school. It's got the school name and the mascot and all that, so it might happen someday. I don't know.
Teachers are employees, administrators are employees. There could be, maybe it'll take 10, 20 years, but why can't the players just be employees of the school? Winding things down here, Pig's Feet asks, what is your opinion of the close game by the Arkansas basketball team? Ailey Weiss and I were in Louisiana. We were watching this game. We're like, what is going on? Trevin Brazil, excuse me, hurt. That may have been by design there. But anyways, go ahead, Mike. Take it away.
Well, Cal, if you're not paying attention, let me just say this, because I noticed this last year. He doesn't usually, when he brings in a no-name team, they're usually pretty good. And he knows that. He knew this coach. He knew the way he coached. He knew it was going to be a tough game. Here's what happened. They're playing a team, a no-name team, Samford. These guys played defense like you wouldn't believe. They will not break down. You've got to work to get a good shot from those guys.
And they won 22 games a year ago, too, so this was not a slouch.
So they're not a slouch team. And then they also defensively will test you, but then they will test your defense. They worked and worked and worked and worked, and then all of a sudden they've got a backdoor layup or they've got a wide open three. Now look, Arkansas still played well. They got a 10-point lead 2 or 3 times in the first half, got it up to 12 at one point. It was still 10 at the half. But every time they relaxed and thought, well, we're going to pull away now, boom, that's when those guys turned it up again. The first 2.5 minutes of the second half, that lead went from 10 to 2. But give Arkansas credit. When they got it down to 2, they jumped it back up to 15. But then it was back down to 8. It just went back and forth like that. And Cal said, every time I thought we had it going, we then would go down and do something stupid like one guy tries to go through 4 guys and gets his shot blocked or it goes out of bounds, and then they get the ball and go right down the court and get a wide open layup, and I'm going, are you kidding me? But he does that on purpose. I'm telling you, he did that to show these guys, you may be playing somebody like that in the NCAA tournament, a no-name team that will do that to you and will beat you.
One player gets into foul trouble, they got a guy that gets hot that you can get beat on any night.
So I think all of these things right now are a lesson he's trying to teach.
Yeah, and perfect point there on the lesson thing. And that was my point on Trevin Brazil. Plays against Michigan State. Maybe something happened with the towel there where he doesn't play the next game against UCA. They dominate the game. And what does Cal say? Man, we got a lot of work to do. They won the game by 37 points. Then they came back, Brazil's back, and what happened? Was it a 4-point win, 5-point win?
4-point win. It was 10 with about 2 minutes to go, and then it just, in the last 30 seconds, it went from 10 to 2 with a lot of crazy stuff that happened. But Arkansas was not, or 4. Arkansas was not in a danger of losing that game, believe me. They weren't going to lose it. It just was uncomfortable, a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah. Final question here of the week coming from Hill Country Hog, who asked, Acuff and Thomas are probably one and done, good for them, but they don't share the ball. That's the problem with 5-star players. They can get you beat come tournament time. It happened for Calipari at Kentucky a lot.
That claim that they don't share the ball is not supported by the stats. those two guys both have the same number of stats, same number of assists, and they're averaging each right at 9 assists a game. That's a good number for a guard. So they do share the ball. I think the problem, though, is you've got these two inside players, Ewing and Pringle, that need to score more, and they need to be more of a factor inside, and they're not always getting the ball to them, and that's the thing they need to work on. And that's something that I think Cal mentioned that he's going to work with. Everybody knows that they're not going anywhere if Pringle and Ewing don't score, if they don't rebound, if they don't play defense, and they haven't been. But I think it's because they've been left out. It's almost like, well, who are you guys?
Yeah.
And you've got to make them a part of this team, or they're not going. You're not going to go to Florida and have any chance of winning a game like that. You're not going to go to Alabama and have any chance of winning that game if you don't have an inside presence. That's when they got better last year, is when their inside game got better. So I think he's going to make it happen, but I can't just say that. I mean, he's got to make it happen, and that's something that that the fans need to watch over the next few games to see what those two guys do.
They've got some big-time games coming up. Next week it's Duke. Then in some order they play Houston, Texas Tech, all those games basically in the next 3.5 weeks. What are you looking for from this team? You know, it's not just as simple as like, well, they better win those games. Of course, that's not the case. But, you know, what do you want to see against those high-caliber opponents that tells you, hey, Arkansas's got something here?
A little bit better defense. It's not bad, but it needs to be a little better, and a little more patience on offense. I don't mind them running, but know the difference. This is the problem that the two freshmen have. In high school, you can go 1-on-3 and go through there and make a layup. You can't do that to a good college team. So know the difference, and pull out and start running your offense, and share the ball and let other people be involved.
All right, he's Mike Irwin. That's going to do it for this week's Ask Mike. Actually, you know, one final thought. Who you got? Texas, Arkansas. I know your take. I'm not going to believe it until I see it. Who you got on Saturday?
Yeah, the Longhorns. I hate to say it, but how are they going to beat those guys?
Some players, watch, it's going to happen.
Texas is better than
They're going to be up
LSU.
7 or 14 or whatever. You know, it's going to happen. One of those players is going to get in the end zone. They're going to put it down. They're going to make some people in Austin mad.
I hope so.
And Arkansas is going back to Austin next year, so you don't have a chance to get down there this year. Maybe you can go check that game out next year. He's Mike Irwin. I'm Trey Dare. That's going to do it for this week's Ask Mike.